Hello, welcome back to the Star Trek Critic. Today's episode is Mary. As usual, we start with 100 points and take away 1 point for each error in the episode. This is the first of several episodes that cover the "What if this happened on Earth" theme. What if some scientists tried to create a virus that stopped aging, but it annihilated all the adults and only the kids survived, who then contracted the disease when they reached puberty? This is what happened here on this planet. Luckily, the scientists were able to send out a distress call, and the Enterprise found it 300 years later. The planet is directly ahead, as if they are driving down a highway. Thank you, Spock, you just said it is round. Alternate Earth stories are a regular part of science fiction, but this episode does lose its first point since this unnamed planet really is Earth. They just simply use an Earth globe they got at a department store. And another point has to be taken away since this episode starts less than a day after What Our Little Girls Made Up starts, and barely a day before Dagger of the Mind. It might have been better if they turned the globe upside down and backwards. Does fixed orbit mean they are always over a fixed point on the planet? This is an important plot point since it takes them straight to the source of what caused the disaster in the first place. I will have to take 1 point away, either for not beaming down and protecting the suits, or for not checking to see if the distress call meant there might be a plague down there that could kill them all. Keep your eye on the Rusk Hotel, it's in almost every outdoor scene. The city they beam down to doesn't look like the Mayberry set from the Andy Griffith Show at all, not one bit. This conversation loses 1 point because it simply tells the audience it is an alternate Earth story, like we aren't smart enough to figure that one out on our own. I don't think McCoy liked the Andy Griffith Show. Kirk hands the tricycle to Spock. Spock gives them this look that says, "Why the hell did you give it to me?" Then he hands it to McCoy, who decides to play with the bell on wheels. Never play with a Grumps tricycle. Security heard it, but they never respond. Kirk initiates first contact with a right hook. The first Grump they meet dies and gives them some clues. They never really learn how long a Grump can live before they burn out. So they hear a noise and run after it. Security is always trailing. This 1960s city is surrounded by 1960s warehouses. Or are they sound stages? Kirk hides behind the tree. They will never see him there. The stables make you wonder, after all this time, shouldn't this place also be overrun with wildlife? Not only are there no people, there are no animals either. Kirk and Spock lead the way to the suspicious building and go inside first. Security is always trailing. I have to take a point, since in this episode the security guards suck. Are Kirk and Spock shopping at an antique store, or are they just telling the audience what's going on? It's a good thing the phasers are fake. The security guard is aiming at Kirk. And here is Mary. They were expecting another Grump. And strangely, they just forgot about that incident with the tricycle. So does Spock notice the hand, the hole in the dirt, or the big spotlight shining on the glass? So here Mary says they do know what happens to the kids when they grow up, but the kids have also been in some serious denial for the past 300 years as well. Mary mentions the before time and the awful things, and McCoy figures it out. Kirk makes his move on a 300-year-old teenager. This is the third time they passed the Rusk Hotel. If you noticed, they never seem to look for the distress beacon that brought them there. Spock has the guards go around the ladder while he tries to squeeze behind it. I will have to take another point from the security guards. Spock says, "Cover me." This guard thinks that means aim the phaser at his back. What Spock really needs to do is bitch slap him down the alley for being that stupid. While this may look like the kids playing a game and just being brats, it's really their way of luring the Grumps away from their home. After all, they have been using this tactic for 300 years. And now Mary makes her move on the captain. And Kirk now has the zombie virus. Here is an important plot point. The medical office is also where the distress signal is sent out. We'll get back to that later. Now McCoy and Kirk are both communicating with the Enterprise. Their advanced computer system will be significant in finding a cure, and Kirk says no one else beams down and to keep open communications. I guess that means they should always have their communicators at their sides at all times. Here is the time where Spock and McCoy have to bicker about blood color, and just about everything else. It's in their contract that they have to bicker with each other at least once each episode. Mary says it covers you fast if you're old. McCoy is like, "Thanks for noticing that I'm old." Here you learn the backstory. The scientists were creating a virus that would stop aging, but created a zombie virus instead. Not once in 10 seasons of The Walking Dead have they ever come up with their backstory. Spock tells Jim Mary is growing up and attracted to him. Kirk responds by making Mary clean up their mess and sharpen pencils. Two topics that aren't covered in this show. After 300 years, would these kids learn about farming? Eventually that big warehouse in the distance is going to run out of food, and these kids are still running around like street rats. And how old are Mary and John in Earth years here? Both actors were in their 20s when this was filmed, but they look about 16 in the show. But maturity-wise, they're still about 12. I think after 300 years, the older kids would have been able to push past that barrier. But this is only one community on the planet, and the crew's #1 priority at the time is just to stay alive. And yes, she does know that was the first thing she told them. They obviously haven't seen the show. Of course, this fear of what will happen to the kids is probably the #1 reason they refuse to grow up after all this time. This line can be interpreted in many ways. What he really meant was he wants to meet the other kids. Rand is a little concerned about the age difference. Spock blows her off, and Rand's look says, "Spock, you're an asshole." John starts the day with morning stretches. John has it figured out, but he can't figure out Mary. Don't worry, John. Earthmen have the same problem. Is that a giant drum in the middle of the room? Louise appears and the kids run through the store frantically. If you notice, the older boys aren't present. Mary screams so loud she scares Kirk. Louise jumps on Kirk's back. I'm sure Kirk is a lot stronger, but he's probably more concerned that she doesn't bite him. Here is a good shot of Louise right before Kirk stuns her. His phaser is set on stun, but it kills her. The aging process is catching up on her just too fast. And here's proof the kids really do know what happens to them when they get older. Spock has been reading the notes of the last Doctor, who also claimed he was going mad at the time. He estimates Mary doesn't have that much long to go. The ship's computer calculates they have only 1 week. Spock makes things worse by watching the Ring video. Unfortunately, Spock is also a carrier, which means he can't go back to the ship. That's what she said. You always see the Enterprise after the commercial break, but for this episode, almost all of it takes place on the planet's surface. McCoy makes a discovery. Kirk tells Rand to take Mary out, but it looks like she wanted to stay and hear what he was going to say as well. McCoy describes what they were trying to create. Spock states the obvious. The correct word is antidote, not vaccine. Alright, the kids lure the 3 out of the lab, and John manages to sneak in and get what looks to be 5 communicators. I have to take 1 point away. Since the communicators are so important, they would never leave all 5 laying around like that. And why doesn't security have theirs? They should be on patrol and communicating all the time. Oh, that's right, they suck. So now they are screwed. 1 more point for the Enterprise not beaming down a communicator when they lost contact. Their GPS system would have shown that they were stolen. And 1 more point for not using the signal tower. They already mentioned they are in the same building that sent out the distress call. Here is where they mention the food supply is running out, but they're very vague on what that food is or where it is. Here is where we get the little love triangle problem. Rand is terrified of what is happening to her and wants Jim to notice her one last time. They were never really romantically involved, but Mary sees it differently. McCoy has successfully isolated the disease, so now they have a chance, except there is a new problem now. So Mary misinterpreted things between Kirk and Rand, and now she is furious and wants to get even. Maybe she is an Earth woman after all. I think this happened to me just last week. This goes down in history as the bonk bonk on the head show. And this little dialogue shows that Mary is an Earth woman after all. Spock's prediction of the danger without the computers is rather logical. The kids are in total denial of the disease. Kirk has to literally rub her nose in it to get through. You'd think after 300 years these kids could come up with better games. These are boring. Look closely, the ropes are tied around her waist under her elbows. Now they are over her elbows, so -1 point. So here the kids make a game, but it is really a defense against what they presume to be a grub. Kirk grabs the bonk bonk kid and throws him off the desk. John calls Kirk a bad citizen for yelling. I guess throwing a kid is okay around here. Kirk tries to reason with them, but then they go into their nya-nya game and attack him. It might have been a good idea to take security with them, but they kind of suck in this show, and half the time they're pointing their phasers at Kirk and Spock. This little girl says, hey, they're beating the living shit out of him. Kirk gets through to him by making a double dare. And the double dare worked. Spock is intent on waiting until they get computer results, but McCoy can't wait. Spock is correct though. This is a bad call on McCoy's part. If he died, they would have lost their doctor and been no more closer to the results. There's really only one reason why he was so intent on taking it. It was because Mary called him old. Oh look, security actually showed up this time, and he just had to wait like 5 more minutes. The kids arrive just in time to see McCoy get healed, which happens unusually quick. This is a good shot of the kids, just like the Lost Boys. The Enterprise saves the children, but did that break the Prime Directive of non-interference? Rand's comment is correct. They need to leave more than just one medical team. There is an entire planet of wild children running around. They should have stayed until the actual research vessel arrived, so I will have to take a point for that. And the reason this comment is made is because Grace Lee Whitney is actually older than William Shatner. And her look says, Kirk, you're an asshole too. So who are these Lost Boys who never grow up and play games all day for 300 years? Mary was excellently played by the talented Kim Darby. Little did she know at the time that sometime in the future this Star Trek character and this Star Trek character would create this couple and this family, have these 2 sons, one of which could not only pick up trashy women, but by using household items was able to create this space shuttle. Michael J. Pollard has over 100 film credits. He's one of the few who's been on Star Trek and Lost in Space. We will see Ed McCready in 4 more Star Trek episodes. Irene Sale is a stunt double in Beggar of the Mind and Shore Leave. John Megna had a short life but does have a lot of acting credits, including To Kill a Mockingbird. Iona Morris isn't done with Star Trek yet. You can see her here on Voyager. And Bill Morris is also going to be seen in Star Trek again here in Star Trek 3. He's also in Deep Space Nine and here in Voyager. Kelly Flanagan went on to star in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. I will admit it, when I was 5 years old and watched this show, I had a really big crush on her. Keith Taylor was also in Star Trek and Lost in Space, while Stephen McVitie went on to produce The Passion of the Christ and We Were Soldiers. Grace Lee Whitney's son Scott was one of the Lost Boys. Gene Roddenberry's 2 daughters also play some of the kids, as well as Kirk's 2 daughters. And those are the 300-year-old Lost Boys. This is the last time we see Farrell. David Roth was born in Morocco, and we will see him in 8 more Star Trek episodes. And Lieutenant Leslie was played by Eddie Paskey, who managed to be on a whopping 60 Star Trek episodes, and that's in spite of constantly aiming his phaser at Kirk and Spock. And that ends the first Alternate Earth episode, an excellent example of science fiction on TV. The episode Mary gets a score of 89%. Thanks for viewing. What are your thoughts on the show? Leave your comments below. Specifically, will the kids age now that the virus has been eradicated? Should the records have been destroyed to prevent a scientist from making a copycat virus? And was curing the disease breaking the Prime Directive? Leave your comments below, check out the polls. Please check out my other videos and playlists. Click that subscribe button, the like button, and that share button. And I will see you again real soon.